Hello, this is Susan Proctor, and my functional area presentation will be about career services. In this presentation, I'll provide an overview of the functional roles that are a part of career services, as well as a brief history, and talk about some emerging trends of collegiate career services offices. Career services is one of the core student affairs functional areas as identified by the Council for the Advancement of Standards in Higher Education, or else CAS. In CAS, along with one of its member organizations, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, or NACE, have each established essential functions that Collegiate Career Services Office must provide or coordinate the oversight of. So first I'm going to go over those 8 essential functions. So first and foremost, career services offices must provide career coaching, advising, or counseling to our constituents. Generally that's students and alums of the institution. That can come in many different forms, but must cover many different sub-items that you can see listed here, which I won't go through them all now. I'll touch on most of these in separate functions, but a couple things that I wanted to mention here was just the difference in verbiage. So career coaches, advisors, and counselors can be used interchangeably. However, there's a little bit of variation in there. Career counselors, to be called a counselor, must actually be licensed counseling professionals. They must have a doctorate degree in counseling. So some offices, some career services offices will have career counselors as part of their team. Others will have coaches and advisors who are generally trained either in psychology or in student affairs work to provide that advice and counsel and coaching. And they can do that in a number of different ways, as you see here. It can be provided in person through appointments. It could be through group programs, presentations, or courses. Increasingly, there's a focus on career education even in student seminars, and also must be accessible in an online distance learning format. So career services secondary function is to provide information to students and alums who may not be able to access traditional campus services through online and distance formats. So any of the services that we would provide for students that come into the office, we also must have that available online. That includes job postings, information about career transitions or workplace transitions. So that alum who may be 20 years out and may not be living in a city that's close to a main campus would need to be able to assess that information. Also must provide information, and this really gets at increased accountability. Again, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but we must obtain and provide online information about graduate destinations and career outcomes. Where are they going after they leave our office? Career information. So we must provide career information, whether that be online, also in print and other accessible formats on a number of different things that we counsel and advise students and alums on. So self-assessment, looking at what are students good at, what are they passionate about, what kind of good cultural fit may be made for them, and how does that relate not only to their academic pursuits, but also eventually how does that fit into their long-term career plans. Must provide listings of jobs and experiential education. Again, I'll get to some of this later on. Also must provide information about current and emerging technologies and tools and trends. So that's something that's always changing in the workforce landscape. And so providing information on students so they can stay current with that, how to use LinkedIn, things along those lines in order to stay competitive in the job market. We must provide employment services to our constituents, and it must be full and all-encompassing, a broad range of services to provide to help prepare students for job and internship search. That could be anything from helping them put together a resume and a cover letter to helping in practicing interviewing skills, working on networking, providing information on how to accurately research an employer so that they are being prepared for those interviews and interactions with employers. Provide services that help students maintain, develop an appropriate personal and professional brand. Increasingly, that's online. How to make sure that when employers are looking at students, they're seeing professional images, things along those lines. Also must provide services which allow students to interact and connect with employers so that they can eventually have that exposure and reach those jobs. Additionally, a lot of information goes into helping students understand and evaluate employment offers and employment categories. So what is a third-party employer? What does it mean to be in a contract position? And what kind of implications does that have when evaluating a job offer? Also must provide guidance and information and services on employment law and practices and regulations, domestic and international, and how those regulations may change from country to country. Increasingly, we see this with international students who are here studying and want work experience, whether that's as a student on campus or in an internship, and or whether they are looking to stay after they graduate, which requires knowledge of visas and sponsorship and things along those lines. Career services offices are also responsible for providing students with information, preparation for graduate or professional school. So if their ultimate career plans involve some other terminal degree, how do they go about identifying where they might obtain that, and how are they going to present themselves effectively for candidacy for those programs? And that might be with applications and letters of intent and very unique interviewing for those professional schools, as well as providing connections to those schools, be it online or through events. Experiential learning or education, which typically means some type of high impact practice that the students will have to sort of test out what they think they would like to do. So that could be through a campus job that's getting some experience for them. Generally, it's often internships or co-ops where they're working outside with an employer and gaining those skills that they're learning in the classroom. It could be civic engagement, service learning, or volunteering, or even could be as little as a job shadow with an employer. So we provide connections for students to employers. We provide information to campus communities and partner with departments, especially those that might mandate an experiential learning opportunity within their curriculum, and provide supervision and development not only to the employers but to the students that are engaged in those practices, and making sure that everything is legit. So monitoring postings to make sure that they're not scam institutions or people that are looking to take advantage of students, ensuring that organizations are following federal regulations and are not displacing permanent employees with free labor, things along those lines. Also provide services not only to students and graduates of the institution, but to employers, recruitment and other services, so that students have access to these employers and so that they can be employed gainfully in the long run. We establish recruitment policies and procedures that employers must follow when they're on campus. And we facilitate introductions and building of community with a number of different entities on campus, between faculty, between student organizations, and with administrators, so that they can have feedback about how they are doing in preparing students for the world of work. And that kind of leads to the final essential function here, which is providing consultative services and information to our campus partners, faculty and administration. Generally, that's guidance and support to career development activities, on feedback on curriculum, as well as information on what's appropriate in making student referrals and references, and providing career data that is useful for accreditation, for marketing, and curriculum development as well. So that would be career outcomes and how they can leverage those further. So there are a number of different ways that career offices are modeled in order to provide these services, and I'm not going to go into everything, but did want to mention a couple of things. So career services can actually provide those services all out of one office, or there may be a separation of service delivery that makes more sense for a particular institution. So for example, Grand Valley works with the counseling center, who will often do initial self-assessment or career assessments, administer those to students. So Grand Valley likes those to be administered by licensed counselors, and not everyone on our staff is a licensed counselor, so we'll work closely with the counseling center to administer that, as well as the financial aid office at Grand Valley is the one who does student employment. Centralized versus decentralized models. Centralized career services office will typically mean that the institution has just one main career services office that is responsible for the functions that we've talked about. Decentralized model would mean generally that there are multiple career offices on campus, and generally they are organized by college or school. So often that will look like one career office for liberal arts and humanities, and then maybe the College of Business would have its own separate career center, as well as maybe the College of Engineering. And that was the case with the individual that I interviewed for this presentation, who was the director at Western Michigan. So they have a decentralized model. So next I wanted to go through just a real brief history about the evolution of career services. So career services, like we've learned in other areas of higher education, has evolved and changed over time, and generally that's in response to changing economic conditions and social norms. So the very first career services offices emerged in the early 1900s, and those were primarily focused at normal schools, which were teacher preparation programs, and that was providing very basic vocational and teacher guidance to students to help fulfill the increased need for teachers due to the baby boom of the post-World War I economy. From there, we really went into the growth kind of at the same time that post-World War II, time that higher education went through its boom. Career services really saw its boom in that time too, and a shift in paradigms away from that vocational guidance and more to direct actual placement of individuals into jobs. And that was very much focused on veterans who were returning to college on the GI Bill, and increasing the manufacturing-based economy. So it was really placing those returning veterans into manufacturing jobs. And we saw that growth from the 40s all the way through the 60s until the 1970s and 80s, when the economy really took a dump, and the shift kind of went away from so much manufacturing and a little bit more into retail and service economy. It was much more difficult at that point in time for students and graduates to find jobs, and so the paradigm or model of career services shifted away from that direct placement into jobs and more towards a focus on providing students with counseling and planning so that they would have more in-depth knowledge to navigate an increasingly difficult economic environment. And I'm going to pause now before I go further and just start another window.